Sputnik Radio.
Now, it's absolutely clear that the United States is using the time of Corona to intensify their regime change operations, particularly in Venezuela, even more particularly in the case of Iran. Earlier, I caught up with the legendary Australian academic, author, and campaigner Tim Anderson, and I asked him, leaving aside the morality of that, is it going to work on the ground?
Yes, you're right, George. The US, of course, has been trying to isolate and break Iran for 40 years, pretty much, more than 40 years, and they doubled down on their sanctions during this coronavirus crisis to make it more difficult for the public health system in Iran to get along. Now, they have quite a good, robust public health system, but of course, like everyone else, they do depend on getting in certain outside drugs and certain outside services, so the US is making it much more difficult for Iran, which has one of the worst crises at the moment, to deal with that.
In a way, it's the second or third worst in the world, and yet Pompeo this week announced an increase in sanctions. From your long experience of these things, how is that likely to play down on the streets of Iran? Is that going to make regime change more or less likely? I'm thinking, for example, of the Cuban example. More than 40 years under sanctions, yet still standing tall and quite prominent in this crisis.
Well, it doesn't endear the Americans to the Iranian people, that's one thing, but of course it depends on the Iranian government and how they look after their people, and they have got a very good track record, by the way. If we go to an independent source, the UNDP, we'll see that human development in Iran is second only to China in the last 3 decades, so there have been enormous improvements in health and education, for example. But that I don't really matters to Washington, because their approach to sanctions, as they did with Cuba, as they've done with a number of other countries, is to try and tighten the screws and make the system scream and make people desperate.
I was just looking back at a debate I did a year ago in which the supporters of empire endlessly prattled about a rules-based order. I thought at the time a year ago it was a tad hypocritical, but as you put it, the people who shout loudest about the rules-based order are the people who break all the existing rules.
Yeah, this is something that is bringing to a head a lot of the contradictions of what used to be called a neoliberal system, with a lot of ideas about free markets and open markets. But we have a world full of sanctions and economic blockades, the most illiberal system you could imagine. I think it's rather a symptom of the fact that the empire is in decline, and it's a bit more dangerous in those sort of circumstances, trying all sorts of things to maintain its supremacy, maintain its technological supremacy over China.
Now, what about Syria, which is the subject of one of your magnificent books, The Dirty War on Syria? Well, tell us first why you call it a dirty war.
I think because my experience has been in Latin America, where the phrase was used, that they were using the Contras against Nicaragua, for example, and they were doing secret assassinations in Operation Condor in the south. There was a whole history of those sorts of wars. And what bothered me about Syria was that very few in the Western left liberal...
This is IRRS Shortwave, the Italian radio relay service in Milan, Italy, signing off. IRRS and Nexus are pleased to receive reception reports, and we encourage your comments on our programs. To receive a special numbered QSL card, please address your correspondence to P.O. Box 10980 in 20110, Milano, Italy. That's Nexus IRRS, P.O. Box 10980 in 20110, Milano, Italy. This is IRRS Shortwave in Milano, signing off. This is